A spade cuts through 7 centuries of frozen Kyrgyzstan clay. Inside the damp earth, a small stone marker whispers a single, terrifying word: pestilence. The year is 1338. Long before Europe began to burn, the killer was already breathing. It slept in the shadows of the Tiashan Mountains. A quiet merchant path became the cradle of the world's greatest nightmare. Now, the cold dust of the dead is finally speaking. This is the birthplace of the Black Death. For 700 years, the origin of this devastating pandemic remained a ghost story told in whispers. Historians argued over dry trade maps, while scientists chased genetic dead ends across China and Egypt. The true spark of the inferno was lost to time, buried beneath layers of ash and shifting ancient borders. We knew only of the devastating arrival in Mediterranean ports in 1347. Sailing ships drifted into harbors filled with nothing but rotting corpses and starving, flea-ridden rats. In just a few brutal summers, half of Europe's population was wiped entirely from existence. Priests fled their altars in terror, and families abandoned their dying children to the cold stone streets. Yet, the ancestral home of this biological monster remained an entirely blank space on our maps. Every ancient strain discovered by modern science seemed to be a descendant, not the ancestor. The evolutionary trunk of the plague tree was completely missing, leaving a void in our understanding. Somewhere, in an unmarked grave, the patient zero of the medieval apocalypse lay waiting in silence. A silent watcher holding the key to our darkest history, preserved in the cold embrace of the earth. The first clue lay forgotten in a dusty 19th century excavation catalog from Central Asia. Archaeologists had uncovered an ancient cemetery belonging to a lost community of Nestorian Christians near Lake Isikkel. The headstones were carved with delicate Nestorian crosses and haunting inscriptions in the ancient Syriac language. Among the hundreds of normal burials, a sudden, violent spike in deaths occurred in the late 1330s. The grave markers bluntly recorded the cause of death as matana, the ancient Syriac word for pestilence. These people were silk traders, travelers who lived at the literal crossroads of the medieval world. They drank from the cold streams of the Chu Valley, unaware of the microscopic shadow creeping toward them. In 2021, a team of international geneticists decided to reopen these forgotten mountain graves. They targeted the teeth of the skeletons, where blood vessels once ran rich with life. Deep within the hard protective enamel, microscopic traces of ancient blood had been preserved like a biological vault. With meticulous precision, scientists drilled into the dental pulp of individuals who died in 1338. The atmosphere in the clean room was thick with anticipation as the DNA sequencers began to hum. They were looking for the genetic signature of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the plague. What they found sent a sudden, visceral shiver through the global scientific community. The extracted DNA was not just a match, it was pristine and completely undamaged by the passing centuries. The genetic sequence revealed a strain that stood at the absolute base of the evolutionary tree. It was the genetic Big Bang of the Black Death, the common ancestor of all medieval European strains. This remote valley in Kyrgyzstan was the precise location where the killer first spilled into humanity. The bacterium had jumped from local wild rodent populations, like marmots, into the human bloodstream. The high altitude and cool climate of the Tiashan Mountains had acted as a natural incubator for the pathogen. Local marmot populations in the region still carry descendants of this very same ancient strain today. The Silk Road traders, stopping to rest in the valley, became the unwitting vectors of global doom. They packed their furs and spices, unaware that their veins carried the end of the medieval world. From this single mountain valley, the pathogen hitched a ride on flea-ridden black rats nested in baggage. It traveled west along the dusty trade routes, creeping slowly toward the ports of the Black Sea. By 1346, it reached the besieged Genoese trading post of Kaffa on the Crimean Peninsula. From there, it boarded merchant galleys, spreading like a biological wildfire across the Mediterranean basin. The scale of the subsequent tragedy is almost impossible for the modern mind to fully comprehend. In London, massive plague pits were dug hastily to dump hundreds of bodies every single night. In Florence, the dead were piled like cheap cordwood outside church doors as the living fled. The genetic data proves that this entire European apocalypse traced directly back to that single Kyrgyz valley. The DNA from the Kyrgyzstan teeth matched perfectly with the strains found in London's mass graves. It matched the plague victims excavated in France, Germany, and the far reaches of northern Russia. The dark lineage was completely unbroken, a direct line of death spanning thousands of miles and millions of lives. This was not a series of independent outbreaks, but a single, massive wave of biological terror. The discovery completely shatters old theories that blamed China or India for the initial outbreak. It highlights how deeply interconnected our ancient ancestors truly were through trade and travel. Even in the 14th century, a local ecological event in Central Asia could trigger a global collapse. The silent mountains of Kyrgyzstan had kept this world-altering secret for nearly 780 years. Only now, through the lens of modern molecular biology, has the Earth finally surrendered its truth. The scientists did not just find a pathogen. They found the historical ghost that rewrote human history. It altered the economic structure of Europe, ending feudalism by making human labor incredibly scarce. It shattered the absolute authority of the medieval church, which could not pray the sickness away. It gave rise to the Renaissance, born from the literal ashes of a devastated and broken continent. All of this history changed because of a microscopic mutation in a remote mountain valley. The teeth of those long-dead Nestorian traders have spoken clearly across the vastness of the centuries. They tell a story of vulnerability, of a world united by trade and destroyed by a microbe. The dry, cold soil of Issyk-Kul preserved the molecular blueprint of our greatest historical catastrophe. Every single nucleotide recovered is a testament to the fragile thread of human survival. We are looking at the literal biological birth certificate of the Grim Reaper. By comparing the ancient DNA with modern strains, scientists successfully mapped the entire evolutionary path. The Tiashon strain mutated, split, and radiated in all directions like a bursting star. It explains why the plague was so incredibly lethal when it first arrived in Europe. The human population had absolutely no immunological memory of this brand new pathogen. It was a virgin soil epidemic on a continental scale, meeting a highly vulnerable, dense population. The mystery that baffled generations of historians has been solved not by texts, but by genes. The dirt of Kyrgyzstan has bridged the gap between historical chronicle and biological reality. We now know exactly where the nightmare began and how it conquered the known world. The ancient bones have laid to rest the centuries-old debates of academics and scholars. The truth was written in the enamel of those who died first, waiting patiently to be read. Today, the mountains of Central Asia remain quiet, their peaks still dusted with eternal snow. The wild marmots still play in the high meadows, carrying the descendants of the ancient killer. The graves of the Nestorian merchants are silent once more, their stones worn smooth by the wind. But the knowledge we gained from their dust reminds us of our own fragile existence on this planet. The past is never truly dead. It is merely waiting in the cold soil beneath our feet. If you felt the chill of history today, consider joining our circle of curious minds. Subscribe to walk with us through the dark corridors of the past, where the dead still speak. Let us uncover the hidden truths that time tried so desperately to bury. Until the next shadow rises, keep looking closer at the earth beneath your feet. For the greatest mysteries of our future are already written in the dust of our past. The genetic code tells us that we are never truly safe from the quiet mutations of nature. What slept for 700 years can always wake up in a different form. The Silk Road is gone, but our modern global highways are faster and more dangerous. We live in a world where a heartbeat in one hemisphere can stop a heartbeat in another. The teeth of the dead are silent warnings preserved in the clay. They whisper of a time when the sky turned dark with the smoke of funeral pyres. They remind us that our civilizations are built on the shifting sands of biology. The Earth remembers every fever, every gasp, and every silent burial. We are merely guests on a world ruled by unseen, microscopic giants. Listen closely to the wind in the mountains, for the past is always breathing.